Hi, I'm Ince, and this is The Hurt Locker, a podcast where we open a door into men's mental health. Coming up.
You can't communicate it because you're terrified that you're a freak and a weirdo.
Instead of asking what's wrong with me, try asking what happened that made me need this mask.
And I realised how many people lived troubled lives, but concealed and masked.
You said you don't mask now. You put yourself out there.
I mean, for most of my life, till the age of 52, I had a huge amount of concealed anxiety, which was perpetual. I don't feel threatened now by showing who I am because I don't think I'm a piece of shit anymore.
You're listening to The Hurt Locker, the podcast that opens the door on men's mental health. And tonight's special guest, is comedian, writer, broadcaster, Robin Ince. Robin, welcome to The Hurt Locker.
Hello, this is it's a joy to be here.
I've got to ask, why did you want to come on The Hurt Locker?
Do you know what? I don't say no to anything that sounds interesting and might go in a different... You know what I mean? This is the thing is I'm very much... I need novelty all the time. And one of the great things about doing a podcast like this is sometimes you get asked a question and it's only when you've answered it, you've realised what you actually understood about either yourself or about the world. Do you know what I mean? It's that beautiful thing E.M. Forster, the author, said. Yeah, so I love that. So I always like engaging with people whenever possible.
Great. Although I've introduced you, for the benefit of our listeners, who is Robin Ince?
Well, it's one of those, I've always found it difficult to be a noun. So even though I did comedy for years, I never really called myself a comedian because I thought, oh, that's a lot of, suddenly that really is rigid. And I suppose now what I do a science podcast that I've done for 16 years with Brian Cox, as in the particle physicist, called The Infinite Monkey Cage. And I also write, I've got my first book of poetry out. I've got a second one coming out soon. And I've also written quite a few non-fiction books. So the most recent one there's a couple that I've written that have kind of had quite a lot about mental health. The first one was called I'm a Joke and So Are You. And the second one's called Normally Weird and Weirdly Normal. And I'm always, the joy and sometimes a very troubling thing of writing those books is I meet so many people and see inside so many people's heads. And I realised a long time ago when I was gigging that a lot of the people that came to my shows would often end up chatting to them afterwards. And I realised how many people lived troubled lives, but concealed and masked. And that, I think, is one of the things that I feel very strongly about. Every show that I do, every book that I write, whatever I create, I want people to feel less scared of being in the world and less threatened by who they actually are. Unless, obviously, they're Nazis, and then I'm not nearly as interested.
Of course. So tell me then about the moment you realised humour could be used as a tool for making difficult ideas and feelings easier to sit with.
I think one of them was I did this routine about impulsive thoughts. Okay. And those thoughts where the example I used to use was you're holding a baby and you're near the edge of some stairs, an open window, or a cliff. And suddenly your brain goes, oh my God, I just imagine throwing the baby over the cliff. I must want to throw babies over cliffs. Oh my God, I didn't realise I'm a madman. And I did that. I talked about the fact that what's actually going on there is not that you've got an urge. When you're in a situation like you're holding a baby, your brain makes a public information film and it goes, you're holding a baby. So remember, when holding a baby, don't throw it off a cliff. But it's delivered so quickly that we believe it's actually a desire. And so I did that, quite a lengthy version talking about that, about 5-minute piece. And at the end of it, about 3 or 4 people came up to me and went, oh my God, I've never realised that. I get so paranoid in that situation. And then I started to build more and more, things like you might be stood on a railway platform and sometimes your brain says, throw yourself in front of the train. Absolutely. I mean, and on this occasion, I'm not talking about a suicidal urge. I'm just talking your brain just goes, what if I did that? I'm going to do that. Yeah. And you kind of hold it. And then sometimes you're imagining pushing people in front of all of those things. So that ended up becoming about 45 minutes of a show as I just kept building this up. And every night I realized, because this kind of stuff leads to obsessive compulsive behavior, obsessive compulsive disorder, you can't communicate it because you're terrified that you're a freak and a weirdo. And I think as I have become over years and years, I don't have very much anymore a hidden self. You know, I am one of those people where people go, "Why'd you say that?" Because I don't filter that much.
Yes. Yes.
And I realized that the freedom when you're stood on stage as a clown, as a fool, whatever, you can go into lots of places where people don't feel, because I think I did I've done quite a few different things about suicidal ideation and suicidal thoughts, having
Okay.
experienced them myself. And that came about because one day I was chatting to this woman. She was an ex-head teacher from Adelaide. I was out in Australia. And she said, "You need to do material about suicide." And the reason was because her daughter had taken her own life. And I've never taken writing a bit of stand-up so seriously, because I dick around all the time. I improvise a lot. But every night when I got to that bit, my brain went, right, you have to really focus here, because what you're dealing with is one wrong step and you could close a door that you've opened for someone. So yeah, for me, it's just that I've always found that, that agony of watching other people's pain. And if I've got a tool that I can use that hopefully can make people leave and feel that the world is not as frightening, or that they're not, and to feel empowered. Because when we've got more love in our heart, when we're not as scared, the moment we're scared, the moment we're anxious, we're manipulated. That's where, that's where so many different people can try and control us. And I'm hugely, I very often think about poets like Audre Lorde. And I just think, oh my God, the beauty of, the one she said, your silence will not protect you. And you look at that and you go, that is the way to advance into the world.
That's wonderful. I'm digressing from certain questions that I will pose to you, but what does vulnerability feel like for you? You said you don't mask now, you put yourself out there.
It was, for most of my life till the age of 52, I had a huge amount of concealed anxiety, which was perpetual. I would leave every time. If I went out with a couple of friends for a drink, the moment I left, I would think that was the most boring night they've ever had. I've given them a terror. The same with gigs, the same with everything. And also a sense of guilt, a constant worry about having, have I hurt someone? Has someone misunderstood that? And then when I found out about, it was basically this wonderful, an autistic stranger known as Jamie and Lion. Jamie is a young autistic man. Lion is the plushie that goes everywhere with him. He said, "Can we chat about the neurodivergent model?" And I had the most incredible 3-hour conversation with him. Suddenly understood so much about how my brain worked. And then over that period of time, I eventually thought, hang on a minute, why don't I think it's acceptable to take anti-anxiety medication? Why don't I just try it and see what happens? And now I just think the world for me was always, the threat was everywhere. And now I don't feel that at all. If I suddenly feel it every now and again, I remind myself, this used to be the whole of your waking life. And so one of the things, the vulnerability thing is, I have no shame about talking about love. So I will say to someone, your work's amazing, you're incredible. Because I think there's so much, like when I was on the train to this gig in Hastings today, I was listening to women talking and they were going, oh God, I really hate her as well. And I thought, how often when I listen on to conversations on all the train journeys, are people talking about things they hate? And how much of our newspapers and how much of our media is cynicism and hate? So I
Yes.
now feel that I'm fully tooled up to go, right, when I walk on stage, I'm full of love. And when I go around and I meet people and when I meet strangers, and you take that risk of having just a little conversation with someone just because you happen to be in the same situation, just go, oh, yeah. And it's very short, it's very brief moment, but that bit of being positive, that's what the vulnerability is, which is just that I don't feel threatened now by showing who I am, because I don't think I'm a piece of shit anymore.
Do you recognize that this new person now?
Yeah, I think it's that person was always me, but I was doing an event recently and I was talking about anxiety, and this woman said to me, she said, I've had anxiety my whole life and I'm terrified that if I get rid of anxiety, who am I? And I said, you are in there all the time. You are this beautiful glowing thing shrouded in a fog. And when that fog lifts, that is not you disappearing. That is the thing that kept in your light, your vibrancy, your vivacity, whatever it is. And so that's what what I feel now is that I'm able to express myself how I always wanted to express myself, but was too scared to. So much of our society is shrouded in social shame.
Absolutely. Sorry, go on.
No. I think that's so people are so worried about saying something and then this is why I don't like banter, right? It's like one of the things where a lot of stuff that, it's all just a bit of banter. Well, I don't know if you've ever, I've always noticed that if there's me and a bunch of my friends, like say, Josie Long and Stuart Lee or whatever, and we're all hanging out, we don't do that much banter because we've got too many other things to talk about. We've just seen an amazing band. We've just heard about someone who's done this incredible stuff. Or sometimes you're talking about, the real problems in the world and the real battles that we need to fight so that people feel that the world is a fairer place for so many people who are on the margins. So banter to me is like, that's all about social shame. That's all about victory. And what I think I've found is like with Josie Long, for instance, one of the things that was the first time I met her, she was 17, I was 29. We got on, we've always got on really well. And then for 21 years now, we've been working together. And we did a gig recently where it turned out we both had a night off. And so I said, why don't we book in a gig and we'll go. And we went and we did a 2-hour show. And before we went on, she went, what are we actually going to do? I said, we're just going to walk on and we'll just start. And she went, brilliant. And we had this beautiful 2 hours with no planning, just going off on loads of different tangents. And it was, I think one of the reasons it works is because neither Josie or me are trying to win. Neither of us, when we stood up there being comedians, are trying to go, I hope I'm funnier than Josie. Or Josie thinking, I'm hoping. We're there to enjoy the experience of being in the same room and making something. And I think so often the terror of being, kind of trumped by someone else means that we put on this armor, which means you cannot show anything, Your
authentic self.
Yeah.
You were diagnosed in later life with ADHD.
Can
I ask how old you were?
52. So it's 4 years ago. Everyone, okay. I mean, I joke about this, but it is true. I was diagnosed by audiences for 25 years. They would always come up to me and they would always say, can you try and finish some of the stories you began? Always getting that. And there's one friend of mine who she feels I've known her since university. And she says, I never told you because I thought you must know. And I think there's lots of people out there who you think they must know, but we have this. I talked a bit in the book. I talked about there's a woman called Sarah Hendricks who writes about autism, and after having written a few books on autism and being quite well known as someone who was an expert in the area, she decided she'd write a book on what it was like for her as a neurotypical woman to live with an autistic husband. And she said that, and immediately everyone she worked with went, "Oh my God, Sarah, we didn't know you didn't know. Oh, you're not neurotypical." And that's how she realized that the reason she had this incredible knowledge of autism, the reason she was so good at talking to people who were autistic, was because she was autistic.
What did it mean to you to receive this diagnosis?
Yeah, the first thing it really changed was having always walked off stage feeling I hadn't done the show I should have done. Because, of course, what happens is every time I'd go on, I still imagine, tonight I will start with that. But, of course, the 3 steps up onto the stage are 12 different possibilities of thought. And so I'm somewhere else. And I used to. So the first thing, when Jamie told me all about these things, I suddenly went, oh, my God, for 30 years, where I've kept thinking I've failed an audience, I haven't. all those people who come back year after year have been coming back precisely because I bring chaos. And now, of course, I can totally go into that chaos. Now I have no fear. So that was the first thing. And I remember the next day I wrote a poem. When I only just started, I'd written about 2 poems by then. I just wrote a 3rd poem, sat on Wembley Central Station platform. And I was going to do a brilliant festival called Beautiful Days down in Exeter, run by the Levellers. And I just went on stage and I did this poem. And I didn't apologise for it. And I didn't go, oh, it's probably not really a poem or whatever. I just did it. I stopped giving all those bits beforehand, which set up all the, oh, I'm sorry about this and I'm sorry, and it's probably not very good. And then when I walked off stage, having not really known how it went, this woman came up to me. She was a physicist about the same age as me. And she was in tears and she went, I know what that poem's about. So even though to me it was about the speed of light and consciousness, she also knew it was about understanding your mind in a different way. So that was the first change. I also noticed things like suicidal ideation started to go into decline, that I wouldn't have, before I would have sometimes, 2 or 3 months where any moment where I wasn't distracted by something else, that would be the thing that was going through my head. And I definitely noticed, I suddenly, every now and again I go, oh, hang on a minute. I'll tell you another one which was interesting was irritable bowel syndrome. Now I know there's many different versions. So I'm not saying this is true of everyone out there with IBS. This is my, and a few other people as well. Which is, it turns out it was entirely anxiety based.
Absolutely, and I can relate to that. When I spoke to friends about them going through that same process. Do you see your chaos, your racing mind as a superpower now?
Do you know what? I kind of try and avoid superpower just because I worry sometimes, but I do know it's a different power to a lot of other people. I do know that, the fact that you can put me on stage and an example I'll give you is I was doing a festival and I'd interviewed about 25 people. The final interview was Alexi Sale. I had a great time with him. I thought finally I can have a drink. As I walked off stage, the stage manager went, oh my God, the guy who's meant to be interviewing Irvine Welsh, he's run away. Is there any chance you could interview Irvine Welsh? There's a bottle of whiskey and 500 quid in it. So obviously I said yes. And literally and I spun round, walked back on stage, no time, literally there. I turned to Irvine. I said, Irvine, obviously, I've not read this new book of yours. Sat down, we chatted for 25 minutes about other things. And then I said, Irvine, I don't normally ask an author this, but this new book of yours, what's that all about then? And just to have that knowledge that most people in that situation could not instantaneously create an interview and a conversation. And now I realize that, the skill set that I've got, the fact that when I interview people, I am genuinely very interested and I'm always listening. So it never, a bit like you said, I've got the questions, and that's how I always find if I'm doing a prepared interview, I read the book, I come up with like 40 questions. The likelihood of getting beyond more than 3 of those questions is very, very low, because each one grows into something else. And now I realize that failure to do the official interview in the interview style is actually why I have a lovely time interviewing people, and generally, hopefully they do too, because it's like, oh, we had a proper conversation. It was real and it happened.
Let's go back. What was growing up like for you? What did it consist of? A mum, a dad, siblings? Were you wealthy? Were you impoverished?
Middle class home counties. Lived in a little village. It was a 3-bedroom house. So my sisters shared a room, and me being the boy, youngest boy, golden boy. That's the way it is, isn't it? But for me, the big thing that I realised was something that happened just before I was 3. 2 days before my 3rd birthday, I was in a car with my mum and one of my sisters, and there was a car on the wrong side of the road and it crashed into us. And my mum was very seriously injured and she was in a coma. And because I was nearly 3 years old, I thought I'd caused the accident, because you do when you're little. So it was in my 40s that I really started to go, that was a big thing, wasn't it? That was because I think a lot of my fear of I mean, this sounds like such a cliche from a bad movie about a comedian, but one of the things I would do when my mum did come out of hospital, she had a lot of mental health battles, and she would get very, very upset. And when she was screaming and crying, I would go into her bedroom and I would try and make her happy and comfort her. And the other thing that I realized very recently was, well, first of all, I noticed it when my mum was dying about 11 years ago, and we were all there and just, and watching my dad with her, I suddenly realized that the woman who came out of the hospital was not the woman who had got into the car. That actually the brain damage that she experienced meant that her personality was changed.
Yes.
Now, for me, being a little boy, I didn't know that because I was so tiny. But for my older sisters, they will have known she was different. I mean, they talked to me about when she came out of hospital, they were hiding in the bushes because they were so scared. And this frail woman with frame around her head and stuff like that came down there. And when they went upstairs, each one of us individually went to see our mum, and she didn't recognize one of my sisters. And I look now at that, and in particular, I was doing an event not that long ago, and a couple came up to me and they said, "Do you remember us? We're the Rowlands." And he was the Baptist minister in the village where I was brought up. Very kind family. And I said, "Oh, I've never had the chance to thank you because I was only 6 when you left the village, but you really helped my dad and then my mum after that crash." And then I said, "Because I know my mum was changed," and his face totally dropped. And I realized, I mean, it hit me very hard. This was back in June. And I think in some ways I grieve now more for my mum than when my mum died, because I grieve for the woman I never knew. And because I used to look back at some of her letters from before we were all born. And I used to think, oh, it's really interesting to see who your parent was, your mum or your dad, before you arrived, before they become a parent. That does change it.
Yeah.
But then, of course, more recently, I've realized it wasn't just that she became a parent. It was that the woman in those letters is very, very different from the woman that I knew who did. I mentioned this in the Normally Weird book. I talk about, when I wrote about that, I said, then my mum pulled herself together. And then I make it very clear. I say, and when I say pulled herself together, I don't mean in that pull yourself together way. I mean an incredible act of strength. She pulled herself. She really pulled herself back into being a single entity while still struggling with depression, all those things. So I had, it was a comfortable childhood. I was a scared little boy. I didn't like school. But what I had as an advantage was to be a middle-class kid. My dad worked incredibly hard to, he was told to, our doctor, when my mum was still really battling out of hospital, he actually said, "Do you know what, Nigel? I think maybe you should just put her in a home and forget about her." My dad would never have done that. One of the things that I carry with me, it's almost like when he died, he lived a very long life. He was 92 when he died, and I didn't feel hugely sad because I thought he's left an enormous number of ghosts inside me and both my sisters in the best possible way.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing. Are you close to your sisters?
Yeah, I've got one of my sisters lives out in Tasmania, so I don't see her that much. My other sister who lives in like about 20 miles from me, we see each other all the time, and we are very close. And I think we've also realised over, like, one of the books that I wrote a while ago, I dedicated to her because I know that we never talk about love. One of those families, which is love is never spoken of, but it's there. My dad, I don't think my dad ever said, certainly from any conscious age, I don't remember him saying that he loved me, but I knew he did because of the way that he was. It wasn't like sometimes you read these sad stories where someone never knows their dad loves them and then they find that the dad kept a scrapbook about the whole of their life. So it wasn't like that. It was So I think we all know that we carry a lot of it. And so, yeah, when I wrote this book, I thought I'm going to dedicate it to my sister, and that will be a nice surprise. And then she'll know that I've put something in print which confirms, you know, the love that we both, you know, have for each other. There's a beautiful book by, do you know the comedian Joe Caulfield?
Yes. Yes.
Her sister Annie died of cancer a few years ago, and she wrote a memoir of her. And when she asked for a quote for it, I said, "This is a love story." We don't always talk about the fact that sometimes in families, you know, love is unfortunately given far too few definitions. You're either in love or you love someone platonically. Do you know what I mean? There's kind of, and
Yes.
that's it. And like
Yes.
everything, that intensity of the love that she had for her sister, I said, it's a love story, and we can call it that. And there's nothing creepy or weird about that, you know. But and I think that thing of being in any family where I always think if you get on with your family, if you are close to your family, you are the fortune of that. And what that means, I think, is huge. I know so many people who, you know, in some way their home was broken. And sometimes they, you know, there's a guy I know, he's 96 years old, and I know that he still carries the bullying he received from his older brothers and sisters, that even now you know, it's that thing of trauma, isn't it? Where so
The
much
body
of our
keeps the
trauma,
score.
yeah, it's so true.
As you were talking then about love, I was getting goosebumps because we don't talk about it enough. There's a researcher, Dr. Susie Bennett, works up in the Glasgow labs, and she does a lot of research on male suicides.
Mm.
And she does presentations about it. And one of the things, she quoted this guy, young man of 31, who had been experiencing suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts every day since the age of 13. And one of the things that come up for him was he wanted love. He wanted somebody to tell him that it would be okay.
Mm.
But because he'd gone past a particular age, it's like people can't offer that to men over the age of 25 or over the age of 20. It's like we're supposed to have all that knowledge, the wherewithal. We've got to
Yeah.
man up, as it were. We can't be craving those or yearning for safety and protection.
Man up, all that stuff. Such bullshit, isn't it? It's the because what you know, it's like you look at someone like Trump, who for some reason is people see him as some kind of he's a whiner, he's a whinger, and he's someone who crushes anyone else because he is all of that insecure. You know what I mean? It's like that,
Yes.
and that sense of what is a man meant to be, and you're meant to have all the answers, and you're not meant to cry. And you're not, you know, it's, I quite often, if sometimes when I'm doing events, there might be certain things that I do know might increase the chance that someone will come up to me when I'm signing books or whatever, and they'll start to tell me something and they'll start crying because there's something that I've talked about there. And I always say to people, I say, look, hate is the most boring emotion and it's everywhere. That's what we should be apologizing for. If you are crying, you are reaching a point of another little bit of understanding, another little bit of knowing about where your pain is, another little bit about knowing where your love is, and all of those things. And I cannot stand the fact that we have, it's like when you have these kind of, you know, Piers Morgan types or whatever, and they'll talk about, yeah, the old days, all these, you know, men who went to war, you know, God, we wouldn't have got through World War II if all those people had PTSD. And you go, oh, you don't know very much, do you? Because the number of men, as we know, that come back from war
Absolutely.
severely damaged.
Absolutely.
And that whole have you ever seen the TV series Mr. In Between?
No, I can't say that I have.
He's basically he's a kind of he's a guy who does jobs for kind of crims in an Australian city. But he
Okay.
also his brother has motor neurone disease. He's quite often just looking after his daughter. But there's this one thing where this doesn't give away anything, so you can still watch it. But he never got on with his dad. Really difficult relationship. And his dad starts to get dementia. And one day he walks into the home and he's got a box of stuff. And his dad goes, "Hi, son." And he goes, "Ah, you recognize me today?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm having a good day." can you, I've got to tell you something. And he sits down and he just does this monologue where he talks about what it was like to be an Australian soldier, to be sent to the Vietnam War, and then to return and to be people calling you a baby killer. And there's this line which he says, I wish you'd known me before I went to war.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is it. It doesn't have to be a war. You know, I think about that with my mum. I bet my mum wishes I knew her before she went to her war, that war that broke her. And I just more and more, I meet people who I think, oh my God, they've waited till they're 84 and they now think it's safe to bring out this thing that they have carried with them. And I will always say to people, first of all, I think we always belittle our own traumas. We go, oh my God, my trauma compared to what's going on in Gaza or whatever, right? And as you know, you can't have a blood test and people go, yeah, you've got the correct amount of trauma. Yeah.
There's no hierarchy of trauma. It's what you experience, it's how it impacts you.
That's the perfect way of saying it, the hierarchy of trauma. That's brilliant. That is, because so I often will say to audiences, I'll say one of the things about dealing with your trauma is sometimes it will look silly because you were a child and now you're an adult, and an adult can look and go, but that was nothing in particular. But you weren't an adult when it happened to you. When you're 3, when you're 4, when you're 5, when the world is different, and the thing that I will always tell people is dealing with your trauma is not selfish, because when you are able to deal with your trauma, you become stronger. And when you become stronger, your arms are able to reach out and carry other people. You are able to spy other people's trauma more. You are able to, because you're able to be more open, because you're concealing less, you are able to take on more, I think, from other people. And you're able to say, yeah, let's share this, because I have a different understanding now, and I'm not carrying, I've not got that weight. So give me some of your weight.
Excellent. I just get this sense of, with you, a gateway to real meaningful conversations, the conversations which we should be having on a daily basis. I get that. You spoke previously about your own challenges with suicide. Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, it was mainly suicidal ideation. So what would happen is a lot of it was based around rejection sensitivity dysphoria, but you know what that is. But for anyone who that sense that sometimes it can take just a tone of voice, sometimes it can just take a tiny thing, and for a lot of people, certainly within neurodivergence, but I think beyond that as well, because like with neurodivergence, like all these things, these are very hazy lines, I think, and so it would take a small thing for me just to go, you're useless, and you've spoiled someone's life with your existence, and so I would just think, and it was never, I never got to that stage 2. But so it would just be in my head the whole time. What if I jumped off that? What if I did that? What if I, cut myself there? What if, all of those things? So it would just go through my mind, and normally sometimes it would be 2 or 3 months. Sometimes it would be a few days. But once it started, it would stay for a while. It would stay for a period of time, and it was, but I also know that what I was going through is, it's like, friends of mine who say, the real point is when you go, hang on, why is that person just bought that? And of course, most of the time we will not see that. That again is, as you said, these conversations. One of the things that I think is really important is to explain to people that suicidal ideation is not rare. You're not unusual
Absolutely.
for having those experiences.
Even the same when, like, back at the beginning, when holding the baby, and you gave that as an example, and metaphorically, that thought of dropping the baby passed through my head. That's not unusual.
Yeah,
it's not unusual, and we need to be able to normalize it through conversations. That these are the things that go on in our heads. Did you, when you were experiencing suicidal ideation, did you reach out for support?
No, I kept
contained.
all of the stuff, the anxiety, the suicidal ideation, all that stuff. I kept it inside me. I mean, that's one of the things that I find now is I've always been quite energetic, but I've got so much energy now. People always go, "How come you did 20 gigs last week and you finished writing that book?" It's because I've just got, and you realise how much energy, anxiety, and negative thoughts and all those it takes and it takes and it takes. And this is why I hate that phrase, keep calm and carry on, because keep calm and carry on means shut up and keep moving the crank round. It means
Absolutely.
get on with and there's nothing wrong with you. Yeah. And apart from anything else, you know what, even the most pragmatic thing, when you're actually sat with a bunch of people and you're talking about real things, you're talking about your life, your mind, and sometimes it might be something beautiful and absurd, and sometimes it might be something troubling. That's a lot more interesting than so many of the conversations we're contained in. You know, I love that advert. You know that advert which is two guys going to the football.
The not a
Yeah,
sissy one. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the because I was chatting to someone the other day who one of their friends had just taken their own life, and the family were, as you know, when these things happen, is people go, "What did I miss? What did I miss? What did I not see?" And you go, "You didn't miss anything." The way that we can mask that pain, the way that we can be. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've often heard stories about where people will say the last 5 days of their life they seemed happier than ever, and then someone explained it's because they knew it's going to end now.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Spot on. Have you ever lost anybody to suicide?
one the my dad's best friend, who was the husband of this most incredible woman, again someone else who we didn't know she was bipolar when we were growing up. Again, mental health, it's not a new thing, kids. And it's not the kids, rather it's the bloody old people in it. Even then it's not most of the old people. God, all the people I meet are just, you know, that openness. But and that was really sad because I realized, because I'd known him since I was 8 years old, and I realized that he took his own life because he knew things weren't going to get better. And that's the hardest person to persuade, isn't it? So often you might be able to try and give someone some sense of a change of their possibilities. But if you're old and you're looking at your health and you're seeing it get worse and worse, and what makes me very sad about that case is knowing that, you know, I think it was a very difficult night that he had in terms of working out how to do it. And that's, you know, all of those horrors that go with that. I remember there's a great author, A.L. Kennedy. She's wonderful, and she tells a fantastic story about, she went through a lot of mental health kind of battles, and she went to take her life once, and she was sat on this ledge, and then she realized she was just in her socks, like no shoes. And she thought, oh, should I take my socks off? Because you don't want to find someone with their socks on. Or should I put my shoes on? And she got so involved in thinking about that she went, hang on a minute. I don't think, if I'm still able to connect with myself, if I'm still, and that's what someone the other day, I was chatting to someone and they were talking about someone who'd just taken their own life. And they said, it's just so selfish. I said, the self is gone. The self isn't there for so
Yes.
many people, that
Spot on.
they're not being selfish, because, you know, when I've spoken to friends of mine who've you know, attempted to take their own life, and so, and they will go. I said to one of them, I said, you know, what about your kids and stuff? And they just said, well, I just thought, well, they might be a bit sad for a couple of days. You know what I mean? That's, you are so detached,
Yes.
and I think that's what, until we start realizing that is not, you know, it's one of the things that frustrates me all. That I've you know, some of those, one bloke from Reform or whatever the other day was going on about, oh,
Oh,
kids nowadays wear, yeah, we don't have
oh,
the
let's not
headphone
go
thing.
there. Let's not go there
We
on
don't
that
need to
one.
go there, but it's what we're, you know, when Elon Musk said the trouble with the West is empathy, you go, yeah, but you're looking at it from the wrong direction. It's not that there's too much empathy, because that moment you go, when someone does throw themselves in front of a train, when someone does that, they are not thinking about the driver, not because they're thought less about that in that way. It's because literally all connection for so
It's
many
gone.
people is gone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tim's just put in the chat research. Berkshire Trust shows that adults with ADHD are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide, and 1 in 4 women diagnosed with ADHD have made an attempt.
Mm. I think because ADHD has, I mean, I've never quite worked this out, but I think one of the things with it is because you're having so many thoughts, and because we're evolved to take notice of the negative thought, whatever it is, because that's the thing we've got to
Yeah.
arm ourselves against. If
Yes.
you're having 20 thoughts in those 10 seconds, one of them that's manufactured in that mind may well be the negative one. And that
Yes.
is then going to fill that space. And I also think it is because, you know, so many people don't think they're good enough. They just don't think and that is another reason I think to always find time when you see someone, whatever they've done, whatever it might be, you know, it might be a cake, it might be a drawing, it might just be the way they helped someone in a shop or whatever, to find a way of saying, you're good, you're good, you're kind, you're, you know, all of those things to, because as you said, talking about love is seen as whimsical or weak. And you go, you know, this is why I don't like those comics that are always punching down. And people call them edgy. There is nothing edgy about bullying someone. There's nothing edgy about bullying people. There's nothing edgy about, you know, having to go at people because they're fat, or having to go at people because they're LGBT, or doing misogynistic stuff or whatever. The idea that's somehow brave and edgy. The edgy thing is when you watch a comic go on stage and they talk about what they really love. Because it's harder. I used to explain this where I used to write a column. I still write a column for the Big Issue, but I used to write one which was specifically reviews of podcasts and radio shows. And I would never review anything that I didn't enjoy. So sometimes I pick something and then go, oh, I didn't really like that. Well, I better find something else. And people said, but isn't it hard to write about what you loved? And I go, initially it is, because hate is a really quick route. It doesn't, there's very little complexity there. Just boom, there we go. I hated that. Whereas love, going, why did I love that? But what I find is the more you exercise that. So when I first started writing, every now and again, I go, God, how can I describe how wonderful this was? And then once I'd done it 5 or 6 times, it became easier every time. So the more we exercise that, there's a beautiful line. It's in a book called Funny Weather by Olivia Lang. She says, we spend too much time identifying poison and not enough time seeking nourishment. So if you spend all your time reading the horrible newspaper columnists, reading,
Yes.
looking at what Trump's doing, like that, the information you're getting is not making you better at fighting. If anything, it may well be weakening you, because you eventually go, what's the bloody point? Whereas when you look at those people, you go, look at that. I'm going to quote this, right? That Alexis Pauline Gumbs, I don't know if you know, she's an amazing writer. She wrote a book called Undrowned: Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals. And that's literally what it is. And at one point she says, who is this book for? This book is for you, otherwise known as everyone who knows a world where queer black feminine folk are living their fullest and most abundant lives is a world where everyone is free. And I think that's true in so many different groups. Like a lot of the men's health issues, I think, are stoked by these people who pretend they're concerned but want to make enemies out of everyone who is not a man, as opposed to going, we've got this huge human issue and it is not improved by pushing other people down or
Absolutely.
saying, oh, it's women in the workplace have made this more. No, that's not the solution at all. That's creating an enemy, not creating the ally for guiding you through.
So what is the template? What is the route map then?
I think it is about getting rid of our masks. I think it is being able to be open. I think it is not being scared to say what is the thing that is inside. There's a beautiful phrase that I was taught by Jamie, which is confident vulnerability. I don't know if you've come across that before. That is where you actually express your vulnerability. So you say, do you know what, at the moment, I'm going through quite a lot of anxiety, because so much of our world is looking for your weakness or what they define as your weakness, I should say.
Yes.
And then using it. So, I used to tour a lot with Ricky Gervais. We've fallen out now over various things, but he would bully me all the time. And I think it was because he knew that I had anxiety. So he could see that it made me anxious and a little bit. So now he wouldn't be able to do that because why are you doing that? Don't do that. No, let's just, and I think, those things where when we are honest that terror at the end, quite often if I'm talking about any of the books that I've written involving mental health, I will always say after the Q&A session, I'm going to hang around because I know that some of you might have a question you didn't want to ask in the room.
Yeah.
Because this you might have something that is in you that is really coming to the surface, but you think, what if I say that out loud? Because it's nerve-wracking enough for people in an audience to put up their hands. But I think that's, to me, it really is. It's about communication, and it is all of those things. The Rick Mail at the end of got his professorship or honorary doctorate at Exeter, and he just says, the answer is love, my friends. The answer is love.
Sorry, gents, to interrupt. I'm just going to come in here because I think it's the perfect time to introduce some of our listener questions. We've just had 3 come in. If I do the first one, Yin, can you do the next 2? Robin, this one's from listener Thomas, and he asks, as a fellow neurodiverse creative, do you ever experience what he calls negative thinking traps? So he goes on to explain, this is where I get stuck in an angry or frustrated loop, and I find it really hard to pull myself out of these. He wants to know if you've struggled from these, if you still do, and also what you do to pull yourself out of these when you're in these negative traps.
Thomas, you know what? That was very common for me in the past, all the time, because the critical voice would always, that was the first voice that came in. And then that would lead to, you just then can't keep moving forward because all you're hearing is that first line's wrong, that first line's wrong, that first line's wrong. I've written a new, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And you hear this wrongness. And I do think that for me, the loss of the anxiety, both through diagnosis and medication, has meant that now I just don't. I've been very lucky in the fact that voice is pretty much dead now.
Good. Can I ask? Sorry.
So I was just going to say, what I was going to say is that what I would do is I would just, if it's writing, I would just keep writing. It didn't matter how rubbish it was. I would just keep moving the pen. I would just keep moving the pen. I hate it. And moving the pen. And then suddenly, so again, I think for me personally, making something into a physical form outside your head, however pointless it might seem, however, to be able to just go, well, I'm just going to keep scrawling on this page. I'm going to scrawl on this page. Or I'm going to keep painting, or I'm going to paint, whatever it is, just go, and you go, I know it's shit, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to keep moving my arm around, because it's when you stop, and then that seems to me to be where everything seems to solidify.
Okay, and I'm reading between the lines in terms of your response there, and I'm thinking about a sense of feeling dysregulated, and that the continuation of writing helps you to regulate how your nervous system as well.
Oh yeah, I mean the poetry now I write, it depends on the day, but quite often I'll write 5 or 6, and some of them might never see the light of day, so but I don't sit down to write poetry. I'll be on the train, or I'll be walking somewhere, or I see something in the sky and I go, oh, one's come to me. And that freedom of having this perpetual, it's like my friend Joanna Neary is wonderful, and she has a sketchbook, and her sketchbook is always full, because she's just sketching all the time, sketching that woman over there who's doing that thing. She's sketching that man who's leaning over by the pigeon. She's sketching that, and poetry and sketching for me, the perfect thing about them is they're short. You find something and you don't go, oh, it's only 6 lines, that's not enough, I have to keep going. You go, that's 6 lines, that's fine, it's gone now. Done. I've made it into another thing. And that's why I never get frustrated, where sometimes I come up with an idea for a poem, but I think, I'm a bit late, I better get to the station. And then I get to the station, I go, oh no, whatever, I can remember the gist of it, but I can't remember the emotional shape of it. And rather than go, I'm going to find it, I just go, there'll be another one along soon. And, have that, to not continue to mourn the idea that was lost.
That feels like a great weight lifted off your shoulders. That's something you wouldn't have been able to have done 5-10 years ago.
Oh, I couldn't have done any of the a lot of the creative stuff I do now, I wouldn't have been able to do it in the way that I do now. Like I was saying about the poetry thing, is that I would always think, like a lot of people when they're trying to create, the first thing that comes to their head is, I think I've done it wrong. And what I'll always say to people is it's not right. Like when I love creating situations where everyone can just be relaxed. So sometimes I do gigs where I've got a couple of musician mates along, and sometimes they go, "Oh God, what are we going to do?" Because I know I came up with that tune for that, and when shall I come in? And I'll say, just whenever you want, you just do it. I said, if you want to start it on one of the poems, I'll say what the poem is, and I go, "Do you want to start it, Jacko?" And the Jacko goes, "Yeah." I go, "Okay, great." And then I remember getting a text from someone that went, "Oh, sorry about yesterday, by the way. I think I came in at the wrong place a couple of times." I said, "There isn't a wrong place, because there isn't a right place. It's just a place." And again, all of these sense, going back to that shame thing, going back to the fact that when so many people are brought up, so many of the school systems are about this binary right or wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can I ask, that critical voice, that internal critical voice, do you recognize it?
To me now, it's such an alien thing. For the first 2 years, every day I'd wait for it to come back. I'd think, I can't be this happy. It's got to come back. And I thought it does feel like a very long manic period. But now, I know what it was, but it's an alien.
Okay.
But I'm able to recognize it in other people a lot. I was doing a thing this afternoon with Sean Keaveney, 6 Music DJs. And there were a couple of, and he's now been diagnosed with ADHD about 3 years ago. I was saying, I remember that there were 2 times that I did live podcasts with him. And both times I could see that he was unraveling and it wasn't going the way that he thought. So like one time when he introduced me, because I could tell that he was getting really, oh God, I'm terrible. I remember I stormed on stage, I grabbed him, I kissed him full on the lips. And I thought, I've got to just do something big to try and shake that fear out of him. And I look back now and I go, even though I didn't recognize it in myself, there was a sensitivity that I was having, because I knew that moment that you go, I'm letting everyone down. And then of course that doesn't free you up. So I think for me now, I can recognize other people's, I can hear a tone of phrase and I can go, oh, okay. I think I know what this, so I'm going to try and say something now to pull them from that.
Interesting. Another question from Eugene. Hi, Robin. You've spoken, and I think you've alluded to this a little bit, but hi, Robin. You've spoken before about writing poetry helps with your ADHD and gives you that much needed dopamine fix. What I'm really fascinated by now is, how does spending so many hours on trains and even just waiting for them inspire or support your writing process? What is it about that environment that sparks ideas? That's a good question.
I never stay still. So what I do, if I get to Crewe station and it says the train's delayed by 40 minutes, I start walking. If I've got a bit of time, I'll walk out the station. I'll just see what I'm going to find. If I've not got as much time, like I did it in Preston Station the other day, I thought there's a delay, and I can either go, oh God, there's a delay, or I can go, what am I going to find? Oh, that's a weird rusty thing up there, isn't it? Oh my God, look at that old plate there saying the steel workers who made that thing. And so that's what I do, is I use every opportunity to keep moving in any way possible.
Okay, continuing the theme then of station, this is interesting as well. Your fans know you and love you.
Yeah.
This is off Rachel. You're delayed for a few hours in a train station. You can only pick one. Which station would you choose to be stuck in, and why?
Oh, I like that. That is because I think there's some very beautiful stations on the Settle to Carlisle route, but there's not enough there for a couple of hours, I reckon. And I'm presuming that I'm not allowed out of the station. That I'm going to have to stay within the station.
Yes.
So I think it would be somewhere like Preston or Crewe, because there's lots of space to roam. There's lots of corners. There's lots of different angles that it's like, I love taking photos as well. And again, it's exactly the same as the poetry. if I see something and I go, I'm going to take a photo of that. If I then go, do I want to? I don't take a photo because I know it's not instinctual. So I think it would be somewhere like Preston or Crewe, because it would allow me just to see so many different little edges and corners of that.
Interesting. How's it been for you being on the Hurt Locker? Am I allowed to say that? Ask you that?
Yeah, of course you are. I loved it. Where were you brought up, by the way? Because you have the accent of one of my favourite cities in the world.
Liverpool, born and raised in Liverpool. Yeah, my parents are Nigerian.
I thought you were. I wanted to check you, because I was. And the moment you started talking, this is something that I find easier and easier as well. If I play Bristol or Glasgow, not Bristol, sorry, but if I play Glasgow or Belfast or Liverpool, I enjoy it more and more. Because one of the things that I think is great about all of those cities is not only are they activist cities, you go there and you see the heart of that, but you also, the more you wear a mask and the more you bullshit, the more you're caught out.
Oh, they'll sniff at a mile.
So that's what I wanted to know, because I just now whenever I play Liverpool or Glasgow, Belfast, I mean anywhere, but in particular there, I think, I know why I didn't always have great gigs there, because I was pretending to be a comedian. I was playing the part. I was doing what I thought you were meant to do, and I wasn't truly accepting where I was, the room I was in, the experience, the possibilities. And I remember in Belfast once, and I wasn't even doing a show about, I don't know what it was about that particular show, but this woman came up to me afterwards and she just wanted to talk to me because it's the first time she'd been out since her dad died. And she'd obviously just seen something was there that made her feel safe. Yeah, so that's why I asked you, because I absolutely love. And the Walker Gallery. I go to the Walker Gallery.
What's your favourite painting in there, or is it the statues that you like?
Well, I'll tell you, one of my favourite things was that they once had an exhibition there of it was the different crinoline dresses of a cross-dresser who'd worked for the post office, and he just used to save up his money and once a year buy these incredible homemaker dresses. And I love that. I love the authenticity of that man. But I mean, I know it's a cliche, but every time I look at that Fantine painting that's up on the stairs, every time I look, that incredible character, that Victorian 19th century woman who has had to give up everything and she's had to sell her teeth and all of that stuff. And I look at that, wow, and I think of where we're going at the moment. This kind of the way that any of us who can need to be pulling the rope as hard as possible to stop us careering into, even greater division. And also, that was the first place that I saw a Turner painting and totally got what Turner was about. Like I'd always, because Turner was everywhere. And then suddenly there's this Turner painting, which is almost all light. And I looked at it and I couldn't stop looking at it. I was there for about 15 minutes because I was just like going, oh, now I get it.
Did you ever see The Runaway Slaves?
I don't think so, no.
It's a big, massive one. Man and woman being chased by this grizzly dog, and he's got something in his hands to protect them both. It's a powerful, powerful piece.
Oh, I'm gonna see if that's hanging next time I'm up then, definitely. Yeah. I just love it. I love it. One of the things that I love about art galleries like that, and there's Huddersfield's got one like that, Sheffield as well, which is it doesn't feel like there's a threat, because quite often I think there's so many, again, going back to teaching and going back to education and going back to things, people think, I don't really know art. So they don't go in because they think, I don't know. And you go, and I always say, you don't have to know art. You don't have to, you don't need to know the birth date, the death date, the brush that this person used. You find what you love. And if anyone then says, well, you love a painting that's rubbish, well, that's not how art works. It's not an objective thing.
It's an appreciation. If one person appreciates it, for them, that's art. End of.
Yeah.
You don't need to go and study, for 3 years, do a master's, do a doctorate, say, in fact, I don't like the word expert. I detest that word expert, because as a therapist, you can never know what's coming through the door. I'm going to do something unusual, but I'd like your comments on this. There was something that I've come across, and it's touched upon some of the stuff we spoke about today, I'm going to read something to you that it's not my words, all of it, but I've added bits to it. But I want to hear your take on it, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Curiosity. Some wounds don't show up as sadness or anxiety. They show up as competence, as control, as endless doing. Many survivors of trauma don't look broken from the outside. They look like overachievers, caretakers, perfectionists. But what's underneath that mask is often a nervous system that never learned to rest. These patterns are often called adaptations, strategies the child developed to stay safe in an unsafe or unpredictable world. A child who learned that love must be earned becomes the adult who never stops performing. A child who felt chaos learns to control every detail. A child who felt unseen becomes the one who takes care of everyone else. These behaviors once protected you. They helped you survive. But now they might keep you trapped, disconnected from your body, your needs, your peace. Healing begins when you can look at these patterns, not with shame, but with curiosity. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? Try asking, what happened that made me need this mask? That single question can transform judgments into compassion and open the door to real change. Go with peace. Go with curiosity.
Love it. Yeah, it's brilliant. I think it's so, that bit of descending into busyness, that bit of always occupying yourself, that bit of, I think of friends of mine who, you know, they can't stop, and they help everyone, and they always don't think they're doing enough. And I know from some of them, since I'm, that bit of what you're right. It's not that they look like high achievers, and yet inside they will have no respect for themselves, and they don't feel that they've done anything whatsoever. And yeah, I think the busyness is that's because my sister can't do that. My sister, sometimes she'll say to me, why don't you just sit there, just sit down and relax? I go, because as you know, and I know, relaxing is the least relaxing thing you can do. And finding a way of transforming the busyness to, at least, because I don't think I'll ever be cured of busyness. I always have to do too much. But now my busyness is one that I can come out of and go, I have fun, not
Absolutely.
I found error.
Absolutely. Can I ask, who's the most important person in your life? You can only pick one person.
It's, I mean, I think it's my son. I think my son's nearly 18. We get on extremely well. We go to gigs together. It's that thing where each time they get older, you go, oh, this is the best age. This is the best age. Oh, I want them to be this age forever. I did this poem in one of the first times I performed. It was in Liverpool, and it was about when my son was 9 and we wanted to build a den together. And then that night when he was asleep, I wrote, is this the last den? I wrote a poem about, will this be the final den? Because we'll never build another den. And, that bit of sometimes mourning for time past while it's still there, it hasn't even gone. And afterwards, this young man came up to me. I think it was the Everyman I was at. And this man came up to me and he said, just so you know, the adventures never end. And then his mum leaned in and went, yeah, but there were quite a few years where it was quite hard to get you out of bed to have an adventure. And I thought that was the most beautiful relationship to watch. In those lines, both sides of those lines are lines that say, here is a mother and son who are very comfortable in each other's company.
Nice. I have asked you, who's the most important person in your life? You've said your son. What if I said you were wrong? What if I said the most important person in your life is you?
Yeah, I could understand that.
Okay. Can you embrace it?
Do you know what? It's a bit like I try never to be proud of anything, but I try also at the same time, I think that as long as I don't feel ashamed either. You know what I mean? I just think that was good. Let's move on. That's good. That's good. And I do understand exactly what you mean by that. But I'd probably still find that hard, but not in a negative, not in the way that I would have done in the past. It's
Okay.
like I'm, it is that thing, and I'm sure you've had that where you've met people and you've worked with them, and you've seen a certain point where you go, they're wearing their skin differently today. They're wearing it, and it's a lot more comfortable than the skin they wore when I first met them and they first came into, my room.
Are you hopeful for the future?
I think there's that great book by Hans Rosling, Factfulness. And he had this, like, he said, people often say you're optimistic. He said, I'm not optimistic. I'm a possibilist. I believe things are possible. And that's how I feel, which is, I said to someone the other day that I think I might be an optimistic pessimist, that I think we're kind of doomed as a species. But what my optimism is, even if we do end up just ruining everything and all of these horrible division building again, I think we will see such incredible, beautiful acts of resistance and creativity.
Absolutely.
So the fireworks might come to an end, but there will be some of the people, it's every time I look at what, some of those people, every time Chris Packham stands up and uses his voice and the platform that he's got, and every time you see Greta Thunberg doing what she's doing, and you look at, and again, that's the reason that don't spend your time looking at the people that you despise. Spend your time going, oh my goodness, that person did something so remarkable. And it's, all of the, I went to Steve McQueen. There's an exhibition of his up in Edinburgh, the Resistance exhibition. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I haven't seen it.
I think it's going to travel around. So I think it's going to come, I'm not sure what the next, but all of that is just photos of, it starts off really suffragettes, goes all the way through the 20th century. And you look at in each photo and you think, which side am I on in that photo? And am I on that side now? Because it's very easy to be on the right side of the past. It's much harder to be on the right side in the present, because it requires sacrifice, it requires argument, it requires, and that's what I loved about his exhibition. There was this beautiful image of this suffragette, and she was smiling straight at the camera because she knew she was creating a photo. She knew that was going to be in the press. And there was one of an 80-year-old woman climbing over the barbed wire into Greenham Common when that was a missile base. And I look at that, and I looked at one of the anti-fascists on Cable Street being dragged away by the police on horseback. And again, looking at that, and you just go, if we only show the negative, and that's why I think, again, going back to that thing about too long identifying poison, not enough time seeking nourishment, we have to make sure that every day there's any space at all that we can use to make a positive connection, to find something beautiful, to stop and, and just look at something, and to, because, and again, that also energizes you so much.
100%. One final question. We've loved you, Tim and I, being on the Hurt Locker. We say our goodbyes. You switch off your laptop. Have you had dinner, lunch, supper?
No, I'm going. I had a packet of crisps, and I'm going straight down from this place to go and do a Gaza benefit with a bunch of comics. So, and again, that's what I love doing is there's no downtime.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay. So before you go and do your gig, there's a knock at the door. You open it. It's 9-year-old Robin looking up at you. What do you say to him?
That's really interesting, because I wrote this poem called The Quiet One. And it's about, I basically say, make it through. We'll be waiting for you. You will be fated. And it's about all the quiet kids. And I might read him that poem and ask him what he sees in that poem, and whether he sees himself and whether he can find himself there. I think I'd do something like that.
I've got another question for you, and it's close to you, it's close to the work that I do anyway. I used to work for a national charity, Papyrus, and we did the campaign once on the steps of St. George's Hall. And it was 226 pairs of shoes. And those 226 pairs of shoes represented the 226 young people between the ages of 10 and 18 that had died by suicide. The reason why I'm mentioning it is because if we had 226 people go to a football match and never return, and this happened continuously, there'd be a government inquiry.
Mm.
And yet, those 226 souls are never heard about. My request, if I can, is for you to consider writing a poem about those 226.
I will. Yeah, I'll send it to you. Because I think that is such a perfect, can I just say, what a brilliant thing that, because the moment it's shoes, the moment it's anything like out in Christchurch in New Zealand, the unofficial monument they had for, I think it was the 96 people who died in the earthquake, just wandering around there with my friend Josie late at night, jet lagged. And we found 96 chairs, each one a different chair, a high chair, a wheelchair. Each one of those was the chair that had been sat in by someone who died. And I think that that bit of, there's nothing that humanizes more than saying, this is not a number. This is someone who stood in those shoes and eventually decided that they could not keep walking in them. And I think that is so yeah, I just think what a brilliant thing that you did there in terms of, and I'll tell you what, I'll send you another one. I wrote one about, I don't know if you know the charity Maytree.
I do know. We used to recommend people on the helpline. We'd recommend people to the Maytree. They were supposed to open one up in the Northwest, but I don't know what happened. But
because they lost all their, they closed for a while, the one they had in London as well, and they've just reopened. Yeah.
Okay.
I've just realised I better go. I'm on stage now. Got to introduce the first act. Do you know what? This was. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you so much for creating this, and I hope that we'll meet. Let's go and have a cup of tea in the Walker next time I'm up in Liverpool.
Would love that. Would love that. Thank you for your time. Remain blessed.
Can I also just say, I love the fact that the position of the clock behind your head makes it appear you have a halo. So that is a beautiful touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that's a wrap. The Hurt Locker is a safe space for our guests to openly share their mental health experiences. If you have been affected by any of the content in this recording, then please reach out for support. If it is an emergency, dial 999. If you would like to talk to somebody today, then please call the Samaritans on 116 123. Stay safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Hurt Locker. Please give us a rating or share with another listener. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Hurt Locker Pod.